Joseph was a young man with a bright future, a favorite son in his father's house. He was born to Jacob, also known as Israel, and was the first son of Rachel, the wife Jacob loved most. Because of this, Jacob favored Joseph more than his other sons, giving him a special coat of many colors, a sign of honor and distinction. This favoritism did not go unnoticed. His brothers resented him deeply, their jealousy growing with every passing day. Joseph had dreams, not just any dreams, but prophetic ones that foretold his future. He dreamed that he and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain in a field, and suddenly his sheaf stood upright while his brothers' sheaves gathered around and bowed down to it. He shared this dream, unaware of how it would further fuel their anger. Later, he had another dream in which the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. When he shared this with his family, even his father rebuked him. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to you? Jacob asked. Though he questioned it, he kept the matter in mind. The jealousy in his brothers' hearts turned into hatred, and they began to conspire against him. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were tending the flocks in a distant pasture. When they saw him approaching, their bitterness reached its peak. Here comes that dreamer, they said to one another. They plotted to kill him, throw his body in a pit, and say a wild animal had devoured him. But Reuben, the eldest, had a different plan. Let's not kill him, he said. Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben secretly intended to rescue him later. As Joseph reached them, they stripped him of his beautiful coat and cast him into a pit. When Reuben stepped away, the brothers saw a caravan of Ishmaelite traders traveling toward Egypt. Judah suggested, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites instead." They agreed, and for 20 pieces of silver, they sold Joseph into slavery. Reuben returned only to find the pit empty. Devastated, he asked what had happened, but it was too late. To cover their crime, they dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood and brought it to their father. Jacob recognized it immediately and, thinking Joseph was dead, tore his garments in grief, mourning for days. No one could comfort him. Meanwhile, Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. In Potiphar's house, Joseph worked diligently. The Lord was with him, and everything he did prospered. Potiphar noticed this and made Joseph overseer of his household, putting him in charge of everything he owned. Joseph's integrity and skill led to great success, but his challenges were not over. Potiphar's wife took notice of him. Day after day, she tried to seduce him, but Joseph refused. "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" he said. But she persisted. One day, when no one else was in the house, she grabbed his cloak, demanding he lie with her. Joseph fled, leaving his cloak in her hands. Furious, she falsely accused him of trying to assault her. Potiphar, believing his wife's lies, had Joseph thrown into prison. Even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. The warden saw that he was trustworthy and placed him in charge of all the prisoners. 2 of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, were imprisoned as well. One night, they both had troubling dreams, but had no one to interpret them. Joseph, seeing their distress, said, "Interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer explained his dream and Joseph told him it meant he would be restored to his position in 3 days. Encouraged, the baker shared his dream, but Joseph's interpretation was not as hopeful. He told the baker that in 3 days he would be executed, and so it happened. Before the cupbearer left, Joseph asked him to remember him and plead his case to Pharaoh, but the man forgot him. 2 years passed. Then one night, Pharaoh had disturbing dreams. In one, 7 healthy cows were devoured by 7 gaunt, sickly cows. In another, 7 full ears of grain were swallowed by 7 thin, scorched ones. No one in his court could interpret the dreams. Then the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Pharaoh summoned him from prison. After being cleaned up and given fresh clothes, Joseph stood before Pharaoh. "I have heard you interpret dreams," Pharaoh said. Joseph replied, "I cannot, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he seeks." Joseph explained that the 2 dreams were one and the same. They foretold 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of severe famine. He advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise man to store up food during the years of plenty, to prepare for the years of scarcity. Pharaoh, seeing that the Spirit of God was with Joseph, appointed him as that man. He made Joseph second in command over all of Egypt, giving him authority over the land. From prisoner to prince, Joseph's life had changed overnight. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph oversaw the gathering of grain. When the famine struck, Egypt was prepared, but the rest of the world suffered. People from many nations came to buy grain, including Joseph's brothers. When they arrived, they did not recognize him, but he knew them instantly. Instead of revealing himself, he tested them. He accused them of being spies, imprisoned one of them, and demanded they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, as proof of their honesty. They returned home and told Jacob everything. Though reluctant, Jacob eventually allowed Benjamin to go. When they returned to Egypt, Joseph continued testing them. He planted a silver cup in Benjamin's sack, accusing him of theft. The brothers were distraught, but Judah offered himself in Benjamin's place, proving their changed hearts. Overcome with emotion, Joseph could no longer keep his identity hidden. He wept and revealed himself. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" he cried. His brothers were terrified, fearing his revenge, but Joseph reassured them. "Do not be afraid. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." He forgave them and brought his entire family to Egypt, providing for them during the famine. Jacob and his sons settled in Goshen, and for years they lived under Joseph's protection. When Jacob died, the brothers again feared Joseph would seek vengeance, but Joseph reassured them, reminding them that God had turned their evil actions into something good. He promised to provide for them and their families. Joseph's story is one of resilience, faith, and forgiveness. He endured betrayal, false accusations, and imprisonment, yet he never lost faith in God. Instead of seeking revenge, he chose to forgive, understanding that God's plan was greater than his suffering. His journey teaches us that even in our darkest moments, God is working for our good. No matter how painful our trials may be, they can lead to something greater if we trust in Him. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs encouragement. Leave a comment below. What part of Joseph's journey speaks to you the most? Have you ever seen God turn your trials into blessings? Let's start a conversation and build each other up in faith. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring Bible stories. May you always remember that God is with you even in the hardest times, leading you to a future filled with hope and purpose.